What's up, everyone? So last week we were talking about carbs, so getting right into it, glycemic index. Now there's some fad diets based off the glycemic index, but it doesn't do you much good if you don't even know what the glycemic index is. So we established last week that carbs are sugar, and basically when you eat a carb, your body wants the glucose out of it. So your glucose level rises. Now when that happens, your pancreas gets all happy and it starts releasing insulin. Insulin is going to take up that glucose and it's going to turn it into glycogen, which, last week I told you glycogen is the storage form of that glucose for energy used later. So it's going to store it in your liver and then your muscle tissue. So things like baked potato. Baked potato is going to have baked potato falls in your starchy carb category. It's going to have a lot of glucose in it, which means your body's going to want to take that up, so it's going to release more insulin as compared to, let's say, carrots. If you eat carrots, not so much, not as high on the glycemic index. So that's all the glycemic index is, so don't get confused. It's really just a rating scale that researchers and medical professionals, I would say, they don't rely on the glycemic index necessarily, just because there's a lot of variations and limitations to it. Body weight, age, your metabolism, there's a lot of things and factors that can affect the glycemic index. It is not a catch-all. It's just a tool that you can use when talking about nutrition. So that's the glycemic index. Now, what's the next one? Finding the nutritional content, finding the carbs in your food. So high fiber foods, we established last week that fiber is part of your polysaccharide, your complex carb category. And those are the type of foods that you really want to shoot for. You want high fiber foods. So what do I mean? So take, for example, fruits. Now, when you're talking about the category of fruits, there are going to be certain fruits that are going to have more nutritional value than others. For example, you have pears, blackberries, other type of fruits that are high in fiber, as compared to things like apples, bananas. Now, that's not saying that apples and bananas aren't healthy. No, I'm just saying that there are certain foods that are going to have more nutritional value to them than other foods, even though it's still in the same category. That's it. For, let's say, vegetables, high fiber vegetables, you're looking at potatoes, broccoli, spinach, great starchy vegetables. And then, other vegetables that don't pack as much punch would be something like an onion. You have legumes, beans. Beans are good for your heart. The more you eat, the more you fart. You know how the saying goes. So you have pinto beans, kidney beans, high in fiber. Not so high in fiber, still good for you. Soybeans, lima beans, and then of course you have grains. Now grains, you have to be careful because you get into the whole labeling thing that I talked about in a prior blog. Your food labels, enriched or all natural, fortified, all these bogus words that they just use to sell you overpriced products. So the key thing to look for in a grain is the word whole. You see whole wheat, 100% whole grain, that's the type of stuff you want to look for. Key thing is you're looking for, when you're looking at grains anyway, you're looking for whole. And that's pretty much all I mean by finding the carbs and looking for a nutritional value. That's it. All right, next we're going to talk about carbs as it relates to diabetes. Now, for those of you that read my blogs, you know that I source a lot of my information out of a book by authors Sizer and Whitney, nutrition book that I've been reading. And according to that book, over 57 million Americans, U.S. adults, are diagnosed with prediabetes. And so that's the thing. And then you have type 1 and type 2 diabetes. Now, type 1 diabetes is going to be where your body produces little to no insulin. And as I said before, the insulin is supposed to take up that glucose in your body. So your body they would refer to that as an autoimmune disorder. And then you have the ugly stepchild of diabetes, and that's going to be type 2 diabetes. I make a joke and make myself laugh. Please don't be offended. Anyway, and you have type 2 diabetes. Now, type 2 diabetes is the bad diabetes. It's the diabetes that heavily relates to obesity. And what it is when you have more fat, typically found in the midsection of the body, but when you have more fat, the fat tissue, the body tissue is more insulin resistant. So what happens is your pancreas pumps out more insulin to take up that glucose that you're eating. Now, as it does that, your pancreas is wearing thin because it's being overworked. So then it begins to fail. And then you still have a unchecked amount of blood glucose. And it's a perpetual cycle. The more glucose you have and the insulin can't take it up, the more weight that you're going to put on, and so on and so forth, and it just goes in a cycle. Also, it's worth mentioning that you could have you could be genetically predisposed to diabetes. But anyway, so the good thing about type 2 diabetes is it can be preventable. So Sizer and Whitney, I'm gonna just paraphrase some things that they recommended for a healthy lifestyle. And it's all things that I've said before on my blogs, but a healthy diet consisting of high fiber foods, whole foods, a regular exercise routine, so not having a sedentary life, getting rid of other potential health risks like heavy consumption of alcohol. That's bad if you didn't know that. Smoking. Smoking is bad for you if you didn't know that. For those people that vape, vaping's still bad for you. So by eliminating those, you lower your risk factors for having a chronic illness or disease such as type 2 diabetes. That wraps up diabetes. And the last topic I want to talk about, just because it has interested me lately, and I've been watching a couple of videos by Deepak Chopra. You might have heard of him, but it has to do with meditation and sleep. Now, sleep is very important, and according to the National Sleep Foundation, adults should have about 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night. Now, sleep, it helps with the restoration and the restoration of your body. Like when you're sleeping, when you're going into REM sleep, rapid eye movement, and or dream sleep, brain's doing housekeeping on your cerebral cortex, which is basically the part of the brain that you think with. So by skipping over that, you can see how your thought process might feel sluggish. You don't feel all there really. Also, when you sleep, you have hormones that get released. So something like like ghrelin. Yeah, it's a hormone that's going to affect your appetite. It's supposed to trigger one's appetite. So that gets decreased while you're sleeping because you don't want to go to sleep and then all of a sudden feel hungry. And then leptin, which is supposed to give you that feeling of fullness, satiety. So leptin gets increased while you're sleeping. So you have hormones, you have the maintenance, the housekeeping in your brain. And sleep is very important, and the negative effects of skipping sleep or not getting the recommended amount of sleep are far-reaching. So if you don't get the recommended amount of sleep, you're not doing that housekeeping on your brain properly. And then also you have those hormonal imbalances, and your muscle repair suffers. So if you are one to work out really hard, that's going to suffer. Research has shown that those that don't get enough sleep have the decreased immune system. And you tend to build more stress that way. And so it's just very important that you're getting the recommended amount of sleep. Now, some tips for those people that don't get the recommended amount of sleep. Here's some tips that I found work for me, that I found appealing. Tip number 1, remove the distractions from the bedroom. Your bedroom should be like a fortress of solitude. No distractions. Why? Because your brain is smart. You're smart. And your brain recognizes distractions. And whether you want to be distracted or not, sometimes your brain does. It recognizes entertainment, it recognizes something bright and flashy, and it's attracted to it. So if you don't believe me, take for example, you wake up midway through the night and you have your phone around or your laptop around, and you go ahead and turn that on. 2 hours later, you're still up, you feel tired, but you just can't go to sleep. How do you explain that? Well, it's because your brain is smart like that. It recognizes the distraction and that entertainment factor there, and it wants to use it. So get rid of that. Get that out of the bedroom. Also, another thing with that is light. So melatonin, if you've looked into melatonin or you take drugs, to sleep, and some people take melatonin, and if you look into melatonin has to do with your retina and how it perceives light. If you see light, your melatonin levels, they go down. So you're not as sleepy, you're not as fatigued or as relaxed. So that has to do with our circadian rhythm. And basically that it's like we're up during the day, we see sunlight, we're up, and then at night when it gets darker, we feel tired. That's our circadian rhythm. That's natural. And so when you start having distractions in the bedroom, you start having these lights on and all this other thing, all this, that, and the other thing, then it's gonna mess with your sleep, and it's gonna mess with those levels. Also, tip number 2, very simple, just do more during the day, both physically and mentally. The more you do during the day, the more tired you're gonna feel at the end of the day. It's a very simple tip, but people tend to overlook it. They're very sedentary, and they don't do enough to challenge themselves during the day, whether that be physically or mentally or both. And then at night, they just stay up and they just do this or that, and it messes with their sleep. They're not getting the recommended amount of sleep, and it's just a perpetual cycle. Third is, if you like to nap, just watch how you're napping. Make sure that you're utilizing naps appropriately. They are shown to increase productivity, but you have to watch your napping time. Max at like an hour. That's okay. That's appropriate. There are benefits to that. But if you're napping at the wrong time or you're napping too long, there could be negative side effects to that. If you nap too long, but not long enough to get your full REM cycles in, well, now you're not really doing that housekeeping, all those other benefits I mentioned to a proper sleep cycle. And also, if you're napping too long or you're napping at the wrong time, it would mess with when you're actually supposed to go to sleep. So if you go to sleep later and you still have to wake up for your same 9-to-5 job, or you still have to wake up at the same time in the morning, well, now you're getting a shortened sleep period, which again messes with that whole 7 to 9 hour window that you're supposed to be sleeping. So those are just a few tips, a few little tidbits of information on sleep that I found interesting. I'd just like to pass along. That's all I really have for the video. Let me know what you thought, if you learned anything. And I've been in the gym way too long. Josh Harris, Seeger Swole, I'm out.